Hey guys, welcome back to the Rise and Shine Show. It's Linh Podetti here, bringing you another inspiring Asian success story. Now, my guest today is Katrina Too. She is the Managing Director of Open Door Policy, which is a non-profit organization that helps refugees from places like the Middle East who are living in Malaysia, and she's creating opportunities for them to find employment online. Now listen up as Katrina shares her inspiring story of how she found her purpose and what it means to really live a fulfilling life. Hey Katrina, so good to have you on.
Hello, happy to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, we only just met recently, but I was really inspired by your work. So just so the audience know, I run an outsourcing company and we're looking into working together because you help to create jobs for people who are going through refugee status in countries like Malaysia. And so we're exploring how to work together. And I'm like, oh my God, I really need to get you on my show because I really love to shine lights on, success stories. And it's not just always about financial success or whatever the typical success people are thinking of. For me, it's even the fulfillment. It's finding something that you truly love. And so, yeah, love to hear your story, Katrina, because there's other things that I admire is about the traveling. It's about exploring the world on top of being able to do something like the nonprofit that you're running. So Katrina, tell us more about your journey, growing up being Asian, and what was your first job to where you are today?
Sure. So I'd say looking back, everything always makes sense. But as usual, as you're going through it, you're like, what are you doing? Right. I graduated from a marketing degree, actually, from Melbourne University. I didn't really even think much about what I was doing at uni. I went to university 4 hours a week, to be honest, based on the compulsory hours. I think the most pivotal moment of sort of education going into a career would be doing an exchange program in the US, because when I did that, I realized that, whoa, there are breadths of subjects that we are not exposed to here in Australia, right? So I did random things like arts reporting, where you get out to the drug district in LA and like you're reporting on the ground on, people shooting up and like what crime looks like there. You're taken around by the sort of town mayor to have a look at the areas. So it was really exposed to a lot of different things. Like I had to write up about a ballet event sitting next to Maggie Gyllenhaal and all that kind of stuff. Very, very random. But I would say the breadth of sort of taking in everything at earlier parts of my education really helped me to focus on what I was actually interested in later on. So yeah, like coming out of university, the first job I had was basically writing for lifestyle magazines in Singapore. So coming from marketing, I think the biggest skill set that I've kept is basically writing, right? Writing, which translates to many other things later. So I did 1 year of that in Singapore, where I was writing and reporting for a few magazines, specifically in lifestyle and fashion. And obviously realized that, hey, Singapore's not a fashion hub if I wanted to get more into fashion journalism. And then I took up the 2-year UK visa, which most Australians do, and went over at 21, I think, to do a 2-year stint in the UK. And I had enrolled in fashion journalism courses at London College of Fashion, at Central St. Martin's. But at that time, I basically took on a job as well at a marketing trade association, which really looked at the different channels and different agency partners, as well as sort of marketing tech members. And that was when I went a lot more into sort of tech and marketing. And I also spent some time with an accelerator on the ground there in London. And then after 2 years of living in London, I returned back to Melbourne, where I met my co-founder then of a startup that I co-ran, which was in the education recruitment sector. As we know, international students make up the bulk of the student makeup of universities globally. And for us, like we wanted to digitize all of that. At some point, our potential investors wanted us to move to Asia, my co-founder and I. And I don't think my team was ready back then. So I wanted to leave anyway because my brother was starting a family in Asia and I wanted to be close to his family. So I went down there, I basically left the role and we folded the company. And yeah, it was in Singapore then that I really got into, B2B marketing within software. Joined a company founded by 2 Kiwi brothers, which basically is an inventory management software. They were sold to Intuit, the accounting firm. And then after that, I went to HubSpot, which is a CRM marketing technology company, which was a tool that we used actually. So it was very natural to go from a startup to a bigger. And then realized then that I wanted to spend a stint in China. I wanted to understand what the other parts of the world think like, right? Because I mean, coming from a more sort of Western upbringing, I know what it's like to think from one perspective, but what would it be like to think from the perspective of 1 billion people? So living in China was really, really awesome. Got myself out there through introductions to portfolio companies of venture capitals who were investing there, and ended up with a supply chain software company down in China. I think, living in China really taught me that a country like China does not optimize for the individual. It optimizes for the system. And I think being in Western cultures, it's very individualistic, where people are always like, I'm important, it's about me, blah, blah, but really there's another way of living, right? Which doesn't just look at the individual, but the community as a whole. So yeah, I left China just before COVID hit. I've been sort of remote since, and it's been 3 years of just sort of being remote. And here I am.
Yeah. And then how did you got started with the Open Door Policy, a nonprofit organization?
Yeah, so it was actually when I left China that I was approached by 500 startups to run some programs in APAC. And I did that on the ground just before COVID hit in Malaysia. And when I was in Malaysia, I got the chance to basically do some field trips with some friends to visit refugee communities. Because at that time, one of my close friends, he hires refugees for his customer support team. And I joined him to sort of catch up with his team down in Indonesia. Being in the region, it was possible. And the minute I sort of met this community of talent, I couldn't look back. And yeah, just had to start something that could support them, because the problem with refugees when they're in limbo, when they've left their home countries, is that they're not allowed to work for employers in the country that they're in. So remote work is the way to go, really. It's the only way, especially for skilled refugee talent, to support themselves, other than waiting for handouts or, loans from families abroad, etc.
Yeah, I just love that you kind of follow your heart and wherever it takes you, whether it's a new industry, new company, new location. I guess, what do you tell yourself? Like, how do you become so open to changes, right? Because a lot of people love to kind of stay safe, stay comfortable. And, what are the reasons that makes you just be who you are, the way you are?
I would say two things. I think first thing is I'm really driven by the reality that we're all dying. So I think if you can really internalize death and understand that every day is just time ticking, you will then take that risk, right? So to me, which leads to the second point, to experience is better than to not experience, whether it's good or bad. With all the risks that I take, I've been in a lot of sort of trouble as well, like physical sort of safety, etc. So I would say that like risk comes with obviously trade-offs, but I would say I don't live with regrets so far, because I think if you know that you're dying, you have one life to live. Are you living the life that you want? Can you go to sleep every night, being comfortable with how you're living your life? Yeah.
And so growing up, were your parents a lot more supportive because you were already, getting to experience like overseas uni? And, I guess I want to understand a little bit about your background, because, I kind of came from parents that were pretty much like very controlling, and I felt so sheltered, right? And I had to kind of escape to experience something. And I loved my freedom later, but it didn't come without a fight. So what was your growing up like?
I would say, so some context, my father is a lawyer. My mother is a housewife. They're both first or second generation Southeast Asian Chinese, right? My dad was always coming back and forth to Australia, between Malaysia and Australia, for every 2 weeks for about 10 years or so. My mother raised my brother and I in Australia. My mum is, she has a full-time job with this, which is caring for us in the household, right? She did a fantastic job at that. When it came to things like figuring out education and work, I think my mother played a support role, and it was my father that I would sort of go to figure out, okay, am I doing the right thing? And I think growing up with a lawyer dad means two things, right? Number one, he's super risk averse, okay, which is the complete opposite extreme as I am. And number two, he always has my back, because he's constantly looking at terms and ensuring that I do not get screwed over. So I would say if my dad especially had the choice, he would have wanted me to just have stayed in Perth, where I went to high school and primary school, and to stay in probably a big four, right? To be safe in that sort of like stable environment, right? I'm the complete opposite of that. I'm a hurricane, essentially. So I'd say the innate motivation comes from me, and it took my parents about a good, especially for my dad, a good 8 to 10 years to really see that she knows what she's doing. Like, she's got this, she can be on her feet now,
Yeah.
But the one thing is for sure, my father was always putting these seeds in my head without him knowing. Even when I was like 20, right? I would get articles on Google News or Tech News in my inbox from my dad. My dad always knew about IPO stories before I did. My dad always knew about what was happening at Airbnb before I did. So I would say it was nice having a parent who could be there for me, like, on a more practical standpoint, emotionally as well. And then it's also nice to have a parent that's basically my best friend that I can talk about work and, issues at work with as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. And you're so lucky because, my parents are very old school, first generation Australian, meaning we came to Australia in 1992. And their mindset was completely different to yours. So you're really lucky to experience that, because nowadays I find myself doing what your dad's doing or did to you, right? So I'm always giving little guidance to my kids, making sure that they do turn into the entrepreneurial path, right? So talking about, your on constant lookout for new adventure, like when did you eventually find your purpose, or what is your purpose in life?
Not everyone finds their purpose. And I think that's a lot of pressure people often put on themselves, which they don't need to. On my end, the fact that I tried so many things actually landed me on my purpose a lot earlier, right? So I think when you try a lot of things when you're young, you'll figure out, what do I like? What do I not like? And the things that you like, you sort of double down on it and then go further into. It's the same journey of understanding what you're good at and what you're not as well. So naturally, a lot of that ikigai will come up, right? For me, I know that teaching and education is where I want to be at, because again, going back to exchange, the biggest light bulb moment was, if I had known what I'd known, what I was exposed to in America during exchange, would I have then made different choices about my education, which could have led me to a different path? The truth is, equal access is very, very important, right? I didn't know what I don't know. Therefore, I made the choices I made. And for me personally, my purpose is to ensure that everyone starts at having that equal access to knowledge, right? Or access to information, access to opportunities. And therefore, in a lot of the things that I pursue, it's around equalizing access. Specifically for me in education, my interest is in children, K to 12, but obviously teaching adults now and startups. But I would say it's a bit of an exercise of what you really enjoy, as well as what people have told you you're good at and what you want to wake up for.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess this is why we're discussing exploration or exploring together, is because you love the teaching part. I actually discovered that I love creating employment, right? And it wasn't until I went to the Philippines and I saw how difficult their lives were, not just in terms of poverty, but even transportation. I'm like, oh my God, I need to create just home-based job opportunities. So it's really good that when you find that purpose, you're just so driven, and you just, business isn't business. It's just, you do what you do because you feel like that's why you're here on this earth. So what are some of the, I guess, mission or vision for ODP at this point in time?
Yeah, so ODP, I started Open Door Policy 1.5 years ago, running it part-time. And I think I really sort of built it very slowly, right? First things first, I'm not a refugee. So it's important that I'm building the solution for the people that actually need it, right? So working very closely to ensure that our privileges are not imposed upon someone else. So first things first, can we even get refugees placed was something that I tried to look at initially. And when we could, how can we do this at scale was the next question. And doing it at scale also means, for example, how quickly are we putting refugees into jobs? The current state of Open Door is that we always have more jobs than we have qualified talent. So the most important thing to always look into is, how do we raise our talent supply, right? Especially when we are working remotely, virtually. We've never met the communities that we've worked with. So a lot of this is data collection as well, and making sure that we measure success and then feed that back to how many more people can we find of this sort of profile, but also remaining inclusive and tackling some real issues in the community. So I think this year is definitely scale up for us in terms of productizing the program so that more people can be enrolled. And the second part is really structuring the social enterprise to being able to accept different types of business models to ensure that the program is sustainable. Yeah, I would say my vision is really not to do this forever, but to give this to my team to run next year. So this year is all about productizing, building a team that can run the company, as well as ensuring that we tighten a lot of the operations. Because if you see, like, there's two aspects, program management and recruitment. So two processes, program management and applicant tracking systems that we sort of are implementing. Yeah, so I think for me, it's all about building things sort of when it comes to people, it's not like B2B software that I'm used to. The work of people, it's a lot more unpredictable because all of us are different. It's 100 times harder than selling software. And it has to be very thoughtful, right? Like, who are we to sort of impose what's right or wrong? It's important that we really stay on the ground and really understand issues before we build solutions we think are solutions, right? So yeah, that's basically my vision for the company, to give it to the team.
Yeah. I can totally get you with the challenge, because like, as much as I love the outsourcing model, and many people go, why don't you help Venezuela? Why don't you help Africa or whatever else? But it's just when you don't understand the culture, you don't understand how to actually help them. It's not as easy as just go and create jobs for them. So that is why it just made it a little bit easier for us to go, okay, well, we know someone like yourself who, you know, is on the ground understanding these people and creating that, you know, kind of putting them to that level that it's easy for us to just do our part of employment, right? And so, but yeah, my dream is one day to be able to just help people from all walks of life, all minorities, to be able to have the same opportunity like myself. Because moving to Australia, the number one thing I said to myself was I was so lucky to have the education to then give me those ideas, and, you know, all my business opportunities all came because I was more educated and had the mindset. So I guess I'll leave with the last question for you is, you know, where do you see yourself in the next 10 years? Once you've already, you know, offload this particular business, what's the future looking like? And I guess, you know, we talk about the dying day. What do you want people to remember you for when that day does come?
Yeah, so I'd say in 10 years, I would have probably a network of schools in rural sort of areas. I think what motivates me is it's not tech. It's actually 0 to 1. It's actually the basics, right? So again, for open door policy, we're not promising like Silicon Valley careers. We're promising the first job to get you out of poverty, to ensure that you can pay for rent next month. Similarly, the schools I want to be building is really schools that just increase access for people so that they don't have to travel kilometers and kilometers to get to a school, right? Or like be crammed in a school with 85 people, etc. So these are the things that I want to be working on, just sort of livelihood projects on the ground, whatever form they may be. I still see myself sort of putting one foot in still in the tech industry, either through an investment perspective or either through coaching or teaching. So I still sort of see the similar trajectory. Yeah.
And what do you want the world to remember you for?
I think, you know, remembering me is not as important as remembering, you know, the common humanity, right? Like, I think a lot of the time people ask me, how do you do this? Or like, why do you do it? I'm like, it's not about me. It's the fact, like, how can we not have that level of compassion for someone else that could just be like us? Right? Like, so I think for me, it's like leaving the world not being known is totally okay. Like, and I try and live my life so that if I died tomorrow, I would be satisfied today. So it's more around equipping others. And for me, if someone tells me that I've actually helped them move ahead in their own development, that's the job sort of done. That's my purpose, right? So what do I want to be known by? Just someone that cares about people. That's all.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I think your parents, if they're listening to this, they'll be so proud to raise a really good daughter.
Oh, dear, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Katrina, for being on. I guess, how do people connect with you?
LinkedIn is great, or Instagram is great. Just my name as the handle. All good. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Katrina.
Thanks,
bye. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this episode with Katrina. But love to hear in the comments below, what do you want to be remembered for? Well, once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode.